I just got back the other night from a pretty inspirational trip overseas to France, and I felt like I should just tell you a little bit about this before I get into the message. Some of you I know are so new to Suncrest that you may not know this. We have a vision at Suncrest to literally impact 1 million people by the year 2034. The way we're going to do that is by starting all kinds of new churches that will start new churches that will start new churches. And really, this just comes back to our rootedness. There were people who were in churches that were very generous to us 27-ish years ago. And we've just constantly felt like, well, the love they poured out to us, we're just going to pour it, kind of pay it forward and see that happen. So one of these new churches that we started is in Paris. Jenny and I got to have dinner with the pastor and his wife. This is Etienne and Laurence. And they're just doing an incredible work in a very difficult city to start a new church. And, when we were there worshiping with them last Sunday, they just constantly expressed their gratitude to us. Jenny and I got to go to lunch with a group of their leaders. And then on Monday, I got to have lunch with a staff member that they have who himself was preparing to go out and start another new church. And I just want to say on behalf of them, thank you to you for your generosity. That absolutely fuels this. And thanks for being the kind of church that sets an example. Because, you hear us say things around here. We are for the region. Well, our new churches pick up on this, and this church is for Paris and seeing the ways they can share the love of God there. So very, very grateful for that. Jenny and I had one other experience when we were in France that I want to encourage you to do. If you ever get the chance to go to Paris, you should take one day and go out to Normandy, to the beaches of Normandy. We walked along Omaha Beach and saw Utah Beach and heard the stories of mostly American soldiers who came and eventually liberated the continent of Europe. But of course, it came at great cost to them. It's a little bit personal to me. My grandfather was not there on D-Day, but he did cross into Normandy about a month after D-Day and then made his way to Germany in World War II. And to walk among these crosses was just, this is just me. I am an absolute sucker for anybody who lives a noble life. I'm an absolute sucker for anyone who isn't living a life that's about me and whatever experiences I can have and consuming everything in this world, but is a person who would give their life. And I just walked through that cemetery thinking, to give my life to something, a cause that matters. And for you, for the church I lead, for you to give your life to something, to a cause that matters. There's something noble and honorable, and I hope inspirational about all of that. And I think it actually interacts with where I'm going to go in the message today. Now, last week, Jeremy Brown was here, my buddy who wrote this book that we're, doing this series that's modeled after. We've sold a bunch of these books. This week, we moved them to the Welcome Center, but if you want one, you can still get your copy there. Jeremy, of course, told me he loved being here, and I heard from a lot of you that you loved having him here. And again, he's a part of a story of a new church that we started. But he's helped me land on this concept that the journey is the destination. And as I've kept thinking about that and preparing for these messages, it's just meant more and more to me and has kind of welled up for me a reminder about this Suncrest value that we have called our journey value. Now, I went through some of these with you a couple of weeks ago. I've actually twisted them a little bit to personalize some statements about our journey value. But again, if you're new here, you just have to know how important this is. We have 5 core values that drive our church, and this journey value is one of those 5. Now, to personalize it, I always want to say, you are welcomed here as you are. And, I don't know if we've ever, some of you I've never had a full conversation with. And I just want you to know that when I say this, you're welcome here as you are, it means that I want you to bring every part of who you are into this room. If you and I ever get to have a conversation, I want you to bring your full self to that conversation. Not only am I saying you don't have to hide it or dismiss it or act like it isn't true to be welcome here. That's true. You don't have to hide it. But mostly what I'm saying is it makes you who you are. Your hurts, your pains, your mistakes, your doubts, your fears, they're part of who you are. And I want our church to represent God to you. And he says, bring your whole self. And it actually, I don't think does any good for you to walk through these doors and leave parts of yourself out there and then say, well, I'm going to come in here and worship and then I'll go back out there and pick it up when I leave. No, bring it all. Everyone is welcome here as you are. And you have a next step. You do. Literally, you have a next step. Everyone has a next step. And I want you to think about this with me for just a moment today, because this is actually what this series is all about. Do you know what your next step is with God? Do you know? Have you thought about it? Have you prayed about it? Would you take 10 minutes of quietness? If you don't know what your next step with God is, would you take 10 minutes of quietness with him and just ask him that question and let him speak to you? Because everyone has a next step. And if we don't keep taking next steps, life, even our spiritual life, actually gets stale and stuck. And so everyone, this is the journey we're on. We all have a next step. And of course, that means none of us have arrived. You haven't arrived. It also means, next bullet point, that we're fascinated by authentic stories of God at work in you. And I'll get into the whole message here in a moment, but I've just had a lot of conviction around this value over the last few weeks. And I wonder what this story is in you. What is the authentic story of God at work in your soul? At work in your relationships? Like, what is the story of how he's transforming you and changing you, about how you're changing your mind about certain things, maybe about certain people, how you're opening yourself up to a new teaching that you're seeing from him, and it's making you a different person tomorrow than you were yesterday? What is the authentic story of God's work in your life? That's at the heartbeat of what our church is all about. And so we've been living on this idea that the journey is the destination. And it's kind of introduced this idea that, there's a now and there's a later, and these live kind of in tension with one another. I've said a couple weeks ago that an excessive focus on destinations can actually cause us to miss out on life. Now, it's probably possible that some of you in the room are too focused on the now and need to put some focus on the future, on the later. But in this series, let's all kind of appreciate that I think the pendulum's swinging for a lot of us, that we're always thinking about the next thing. We're noticing what's on the calendar. We're trying to tackle what's next. We're trying to capture something so we can post it somewhere. And we actually start to miss out on what's right in front of us. And what if the journey is the destination? I saw this picture a little less than 2 weeks ago from the PGA Championship. Has some of you guys seen this online? When it first came out, I thought I was the first person to see it, and I thought this is going to be the greatest sermon illustration in 2 weeks. And then it went big in the last couple of weeks. But here's the idea. PGA Championships, Sunday afternoon round, Tiger Woods, greatest golfer of all time. Some of you might want to argue with me. You're wrong. Tiger Woods, greatest golfer of all time. There's people lined up behind him, standing only feet away from the greatest golfer of all time. He takes a swing. The dirt is flying. And what do you see in the picture? Almost everyone on their phone. You notice this? Except for the guy who's become known as Michelob Ultra guy, who decided, against all cultural pressure, to not pull out his phone and just live in the moment, standing 3 feet away from the greatest golfer of all time, hitting a shot. And I think there's a lesson in here for all of us. I'm not anti-technology. I'm not. Actually, when we were in Paris, technology helped me connect with some people back home relationally. When our son, who's in the Marines, was deployed in the Middle East, technology helped us experience life in the moment with him. Technology can help, but maybe we should all just take a moment and try to become Michelob Ultra guy. Because I'll just speak for myself, but if you're a dad or a husband, I hope you'll listen. I instantly become a better dad when I put my phone away. And I instantly become a better husband when I put my phone away. And I live in the moment with the people God has placed in my life. And I think, it's not about what's next. It's not about posting something later. It's not about finding the answer. It's not about, it's about living in the moment with the people God has placed you with. Now, I'm going to spiritualize this, and I think it's a perfectly fair way to spiritualize this, because this is the verse that actually guides the whole series. Jesus said, the thief, that's the devil himself, comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. And I think the spiritual forces that I believe are real in this world are not spiritual forces that announce themselves as dark spiritual forces. They're spiritual forces that actually get in underneath and undermine things so that they can steal and kill and destroy. And when I stop and think about, man, if you wanted me to really say, hey, Greg, what is the work of Satan in Greg Lee's life? I don't think it's unrelated from being on my phone when my kids or my wife are right there. It just steals something in a way I'm not even noticing. I just want us to see that as you walk through life, the journey is the destination. There are moments that could be defining moments, but moments that would be lost if not focused on living in the moment and appreciating the journey that we're on. So with that in mind, let me step back to the concept of Jeremy's book. He gives us these 5 gears, and part of the concept of this book is all 5 of these gears have to work together. 1 or 2 of these gears might come very naturally to you in your spiritual life. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, 1 or 2 of these gears you might see great value in something that you're good at. But in the way of following Jesus, if we want a life that's truly a full life, the life we want to experience, not something that's stale or dim or depressing, we get these gears, and when you start moving all of them in sync with one another, that's when you get this life that is truly life. Now, today we're going to explore this idea of pursuing truth. And standing alone pursuing truth actually could have some pretty hard edges to it. It may be beneficial to us, might be difficult to receive. Pursuing truth could stand on its own. But it's actually the pursuit of truth in the context of pursuing relationships where things get very healthy. If you're in a relationship and you want it to be thriving and hopeful and happy, but you're actually afraid to cause some conflict and you're trying to keep the peace, and so you're avoiding the truth, it's actually a recipe for a relationship that will just remain stale. It's a healthy truth. Set right aside someone who really values a healthy relationship that makes this matter. It's truth in sync with identity. It's not just a general pursuit of identity. It's a pursuit of my identity in line with the truth of who God made me to be. And it's when these gears work together that things really transform. So today, I just want to ask, what does it mean to pursue truth? I don't know if you've thought about the concept of truth lately. It's interesting. About 20 years ago when I was in grad school, I was assigned a book to read, and the title of the book was Truth is Stranger Than It Used to Be. Truth is stranger than it used to be. And I don't know, some of you will be able to rewind 15 years, 20 years culturally and start to think, that there's actually something kind of interesting going on. In academic circles, the conversation was about whether there is absolute truth, whether there is an objective truth, whether it isn't likely true that there isn't one universal accepted objective truth, but instead we all just have our own perspectives, our own angles, and truth is actually centered within individuals rather than centered in an outside reality. That's the conversation that philosophers were having. But at a popular level, if you just hear people talk about it on the street, it would sound something a little like this. So someone might say, well, it's true for you, but not true for me. True for you, but not true for me. And maybe some of you have said that before. Maybe just kind of at pop culture level, you think, yeah, it's true for you, not true for me. And I think, oh, is that possible? Is that possible? That something's true for you and not true for me. And then what would happen is the academic world and then even in the popular world, they would try to kind of squish lots of things together so as to remove the barnacles or the distinctives of things that make something true and say, isn't it all kind of the same? Religion was one of the big areas that this happened. And people would start to say, well, aren't all religions essentially the same? Now, no one who studies religion in a serious pursuit of truth, would ever conclude that all religions are the same. Christianity believes that Jesus died and rose again. Other religions believe Jesus did not die and rise again. They aren't the same, right? But there's this effort culturally just to kind of mush everything together and mix everything up. And you might even have taken a class in college called comparative religions. Nobody ever took the class called contrasting religions. But of course, there's parts of all religions that overlap. They are all religions. And there's parts of all religions that are distinct from one another. And there seemed to be an effort to say, well, it's just kind of whatever your angle is your truth. Now, fast forward 15, 20 years later. And I think if we'll pay attention to it, the idea that everyone gets to have their angle on the truth, it might be killing us right now. And actually, I think everyone, even from all political persuasions, might be willing to step back and say, I think it's killing us right now. Because all of a sudden what happened is there wasn't some universal truth that we all would try to find together. It was that this group of people saw the world this way and they called that the truth. And this group of people saw the world this way and they called that the truth. And then they just claimed it as truth. And then we end up with, I don't mean to pick on politicians and the media, but it's so easy to say, well, we're giving you our version of events, but we're just calling it the truth. It was actually a politician back in the 1980s who said, you're welcome to your own opinions, but you are not welcome to your own facts. And these days, what does the media do? We have fact checkers. We have misinformation and disinformation and fact checkers. But even when you read a fact checker, none of you even trust the fact checkers. And you're like, well, who's checking the fact checkers? And there's this erosion of truth. And actually what you see starting to emerge now in some media circles and different circles is to say, man, at some point, we have to be able to put our foot on the ground and say, it'll hold. That's true or it's not true. It can't be just that you believe that and you call it the truth, or you believe that, or that's your interpretation and that's the truth. At some point, something has to hold. The truth matters. And we may disagree about what it is. None of us in this room sits so far outside the circle that we get to announce what the truth is to everyone else, but to acknowledge that there is a truth. Well, this is actually a conversation that Jesus was interested in. And it's not actually a conversation about media and politics. It's a conversation about reality and about life and whether you and I are building our life on a rock that's really real or not. It's Jesus who said, if you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now, I don't know how you feel about the truth. I don't know how your relationship with the truth goes, but many times when people start to perceive if there is a truth, they perceive that the truth actually will bring constraint on your life. Jesus is suggesting the opposite, that if you pursue the truth, it actually brings liberation. It brings freedom, not constraint. Later on in this passage, Jesus is still in this conversation about the truth, and actually he starts again to speak about the devil, Satan himself, an evil force, however you want to imagine this. And here's what he says. For there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language. It's what comes naturally to him. For he is a liar and the father of lies. This embodiment of evil, Satan, Lucifer, the devil, according to the scriptures, according to Jesus, gets described in many ways, but the primary way this devil gets described is that he's a liar. That what he's doing in this world, and frankly, what he's doing in your life and in my life, is he's just chipping away at the truth. He's taking things that you could build your life on and put your foot on a firm foundation, and he's just chipping away at it. And he's asking questions like, did God really say? That's the first question of the evil one in the book of Genesis. Did God really say? I'm just creating a little doubt. Just a little sleight of hand over here. Just a little deception. So as to knock you off something that you would find security in if you build your life on it. And then Jesus, one of the greatest claims of all time, a claim that if it's true, changes everything, and if it's not true, should make us all run as fast as we can away from the man named Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It is an audacious claim that truth in and of itself is actually not simply a concept or an idea, but that God himself is reality, that Christ came to earth as God's Son to be reality, and that truth is not an ideal or an ideology, but it is actually centered in a person so that we could have a relationship with the truth that we can count on. I can't tell you how much I want that for your life. So, I want to ask you to think this week about the pursuit of truth in your life. And if you're going to experience this life to the full, let's talk about 3 things that you would pursue. First is the idea of truth. Now, I know this is a little bit heady tonight, but we're talking about the truth, right? And for those of you who have serious questions about how Christianity fits and whether it's true or not, I want to make sure that you understand kind of the intellectual and philosophical context that where Jesus says, I am the truth. He is suggesting that there is the truth. Now, will you go along on a little philosophy lesson with me for just a few minutes? Of course you will, because I have the microphone, right? All right, follow this with me. Probably the most prominent French philosopher of the last century or two was a philosopher named Foucault. And Foucault came at the idea of truth and had a perspective that said, you can't trust truth. Almost all truth claims are actually just power moves by people wanting to constrain or impose their way on someone else. Foucault did not get this idea from himself. He was actually a student of Nietzsche, who was a philosopher, of course, a century or two before. And Nietzsche had this perspective, and he the two of them together had what some people call philosophical squinting. And here's the idea, that whenever they heard a truth claim, they would kind of look at it and squint at it and say, yeah, but why? Why are they claiming that? So if someone made the claim that you should invest your life in human rights, they would just kind of squint at it and they'd say, I wonder why that person is telling me I should invest my life in human rights. Is it that they really believe in human rights? Is it that they want to define the rights and then they want to have power over me? They just kind of squint at it and say, but why? If someone said to them, you should obey the word of God, they would just kind of squint at that philosophically and say, but why? I wonder what that person's motive is for making such a claim of truth. I'll become suspicious of their motive, become skeptical of it, and start to believe that maybe they're, off, but actually want the love of God in people's lives, or maybe they're just trying to create some moral superiority in themselves, that their interpretation of the word of God is a power move to get you to do what they want them to do. Now, you might think, as I'm standing up here, that I'm going to be a massive critic of Foucault and Nietzsche, but actually, Jesus, when he looked around at the world and how people were claiming the truth, oftentimes took essentially the same philosophy. And I don't know about you, but I think if you could ever get Foucault and Nietzsche and Jesus to agree on something, you should pay attention to it for a little bit. Because it was Jesus who, when he looked at the Pharisees and the way that they would make their claims of truth, these religious leaders who absolutely were making a power move by claiming this universal truth that they had interpreted, he becomes, he'd say, but why? Why are you? And actually, it's fascinating. If you look at some of the conversations that the Pharisees have actually out in the open, this is fascinating to me. Out in the open, once when they're tested by who Jesus is, and he says, hey, what's your answer about who I? They literally have a conversation out in the open that says, well, if we say he's this, then it's going to go this way. And if we say he's this, then it's going to go this way. And they clearly are making their decisions about what they're going to say, not on what's true, but on what might happen if they say something is true. Now, we can be critics of the Pharisees, but surely I'm not the only person who's sometimes prone to do the same thing. To not really want to pursue the idea of truth, but instead start to calculate, well, if I say this, then what will happen? Not calculate how to get to the truth. Now, though it can be helpful to take this kind of suspicion or squinting or ask why anytime you hear someone claim this external, universal, objective truth, you can't live your whole life like that. It doesn't actually work. One of the scholars of Christianity over the last few years is a gentleman named C.S. Lewis. I'm sure many of you have heard of him, read some of his works. He wrote a book called The Abolition of Man, where he actually was reflecting on this very idea around truth. And I'm going to read you, it's a fairly long quote, but again, I want us to think about this, about the idea of truth and pursuing it. He says, you cannot go on explaining away forever, or you will find that you have explained your own explanation itself away. You cannot go on seeing through things forever. And this is his point. The squinting philosophy that says, yeah, but why? But why? There's some motive behind that. The philosophy that says, I'm going to be skeptical of all truth. Like you're kind of looking at a lens through something, but then when you start to look through that, you can't do that with everything. He says the whole point of seeing through something is to see something else through it. For example, it's good that you can see through a window. That's only because that garden behind is opaque. But if you could see through everything, if you saw through the window and then saw through the garden, if everything was transparent, a wholly transparent world would be an invisible world. And to see through everything would be the same as to not see. And I just want you to think about how important it is that there is some truth. To experience full life, there's got to be some rock that we set our foot on. Second, to experience this full life, you have to pursue a truth that's above your own assumptions and your own desires. Too many times in our lives, we set the truth off to the side because it doesn't fit our previous assumptions, or it doesn't fit the story I want to tell. One of the best mentors in my life has encouraged me constantly. He says, Greg, I know you might not want to see what's under that rock in your life, but you need to pick up that rock and deal with the reality of what's underneath there. It's so easy to leave the rock buried. It's so easy to try to dismiss or ignore something I don't want to see. But he's suggesting to me that the truth is my friend. And I want to suggest to you that the truth is your friend. The famous line, of course, from A Few Good Men is, you can't handle the truth. Because many truths in our lives are actually uncomfortable truths. And the direction of your life has almost everything to do with whether you're willing to embrace an uncomfortable truth, or whether we close our eyes, leave the stone unturned, leave the conversation unengaged, leave the faith unexplored. You see, I have a lot of conviction about our faith, about Christianity, if you're a follower of Jesus, that I am committed to Christianity because I believe it's true. I believe it is the foundation and the rock. I believe that Jesus is the truth and the life. But if that's not actually true, then I want to be the first person to acknowledge it. To say, I don't have to defend something that's not true. I'm actually on a pursuit of truth, not just on a pursuit of defending the truth that I want to be true. And that's in the biggest picture of our faith, but it's, of course, true every day in our lives. Last thing, to experience life to the full, it means we get to pursue the freedom that rests on that truth. So, it might be your immediate perception that the truths of this life bring restriction to this life. And our assumption oftentimes around restriction is that it means, I can't experience life to the full if it's full of restrictions. But of course, that's not true. The best things that you've experienced in life, your life to the full, actually probably came because you said no to certain things. You placed restrictions and discipline on your life so that it opened up opportunities for better things. That is the way of Jesus. But no one should believe that just a life of discipline and a life of restriction in and of itself is the path to a full life. I was listening to someone this week and he said, man, I knew a guy who's 5'2", 115 pounds, and he wanted to be a lineman in the NFL. And because he grew up in America and his parents and teachers told him, you can be whatever you want to be, he thought he could. But guess what? He could have all the discipline in the world. He's never going to be in the NFL. I actually was playing golf once at Yuki Country Club a few years ago. The guy who was the pro there before he moved away, it was part of our church. I played golf with him. I said, hey, Mike. I said, hey, I'm not looking for a lesson in this golf round, but if you notice something in my swing, I'd be open to hearing it from you. You're the pro. And he basically said to me, he said it nicer than this, but he basically said, Greg, you're about as good as you're going to get. He basically said, some people have it and some people don't. And you don't, so just enjoy the game. And I got to tell you, the truth has set me free. And it's kind of a funny thing, but it's exactly how it works. That when you know who you are and you know who you aren't, and you know who God is and you know who he isn't, and you know what's true, this straight line of truth, it'll convict you when you're off course, as it should, for a better and more beautiful life. And it will guide you to the life that is truly life, if you'll trust in the truth.
I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, even online. And I want you to know that every time that we get together, both online and in person, we include a time of communion. This is a moment for people who follow Jesus to look back on life and remember with gratitude all the amazing things that God has done, our need for God right now, and to look forward with hope, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. So now is the time to get some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and his blood that was broken and poured out for each and every one of us. And during that time, we're going to reflect together. If you don't follow Jesus, that's totally okay. I'm glad that you're checking out this video. Go ahead and use this time to reflect on what you've heard so far. And with that, let's focus on the love of Jesus together.
I am available. Here I am with open hands, counting on your grace again. Less of me and more of you. I just wanna see you move. I hear you call. I am available. I say yes, Lord. I am available. I hear you call. I am available. I say yes, Lord. I am available. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it all. Here I am, here I am. You can have it all, you can have it For the one who gave me life, nothing is a sacrifice. Oh, use me how you want to, God. Have your throne within my heart. I hear you call. I am available. I say yes, Lord. I am available.
Before you turn off this video, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And I want you to know that this video, this isn't the church, you are. So this week, I hope that you go and make a difference, that you go and be the church.